Hannah, I'm so excited to have you here today. It's been so fun to get to know you as a friend as I was exploring Denver and Colorado, but also just in the world of crypto. We had been kind of swirling around each other in different projects, but in particular, the work that you're doing with serotonin. And your just background is phenomenal, like how you've really dove into the ecosystem and also the way you really support ETH Denver as a project and a way of gathering community. So I can't wait to dive in. If you would just share a little bit about where you're calling in from today and what your major focus is these days.
Hey, sure thing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and speak to your audience. So I am based in Denver, Colorado, and I currently serve as the VP of events for Serotonin, which is a Web3 marketing services firm and product studio. And as part of that work, I negotiate and collaborate with a ton of events in the Web3 industry. One of them, of course, being ETH Denver, where I had a history and worked and still currently serve on their board. So my role is really fun. It's all about bringing people together in new and exciting ways and kind of connecting people. And I love it.
I love that. And in an industry that's so much about community and connection and coordination, the role of like in real life experiences, events, and even digital gatherings are so essential. So I've also just been so amazed of how plugged in you are to the ecosystem, the people that you support and really like elevate in the space is really phenomenal. So I can't wait to dive into that. I would love to first just know more about how you got from where you started. Like, I know you really were involved in photography and events from like the get-go, but how did you make that transition into the world of Web3? And do you see some big differences in sort of that traditional world and the one you're playing in now?
Oh, wow. Amazing. This is a fun way to kick it off. So yeah, I was kind of doing photography by moonlight, and in the daytime, my last role before Web3 was actually in healthcare IT. So I was joining from that lens, and I'd heard about Bitcoin. I really fell in love with the idea of a digital currency and borderless payments and things like that. I lived abroad quite a bit during my college years, and so felt really passionate about that access for other communities. We're so lucky, obviously, in the US to really have that stability, but seeing other countries that didn't made me really intrigued. But I was just sitting there kind of like, well, I love that, but I'm in healthcare, and how am I going to make the transition to be able to work on projects that are doing something in that space? So I happened to go to a medical conference where they talked about putting healthcare records on chain, and I hadn't really considered other applications for the technology. And so I just fell in love with the idea that there were so many ways that decentralization could impact different industries. And so I did some freelance work for Vice News, writing about new blockchain use cases. At the time, it was not even Web3, it was just called blockchain. And from there, I was just really dove headfirst into the Colorado community. We're really fortunate here to have ETH Denver, as we mentioned, and many companies who are based here who are in Web3, like Shapeshift and Opolis, and others. And in terms of like how it looks different today, I mean, gosh, if you had told me when I was shooting concerts at Red Rocks that eventually I'd be able to like put that on chain and sell it, like that's wild. It's been amazing to see how the Web3 space has impacted the lives of artists. And so yeah, coming like full circle. It's exciting to be here now.
It's so exciting. What do you think is the most interesting thing you've learned? Like, spending a lot of time in the events and in the ecosystems, like physically in real life. What have you found to be the most exciting things that you would want people to know, whether it's like they're building their own protocols or they're like trying to get into the industry? What is the real like purpose and motivation of these activations that you're often leading, and how can people take advantage of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that I think is important when it comes to having those IRL moments is figuring out how to dog food the tech that you're working on in some way. So often, yes, community is important, and it's so important for us to meet face to face and have those moments. But this industry is one that I chose because it's moving at hyperspeed in terms of the technology development on just a daily, a yearly basis. And so for us to really integrate and test those tools and be open to experimentation, I just think that's so, so important in terms of activating IRL, whether it's having a POAP available or it's early NFT days, we started putting up galleries, which is now a very common thing. I mean, it's kind of like whatever that moment is, figuring out, even though it's going to be really hard to do it IRL and get people to play with it, even if they're not Web3 native. That's how I think we're all going to eventually, push mass adoption, is just like really getting experimental and taking on that challenge.
Do you think what do you think is really working well? Because I'm just, as you were just sharing that, I was reflecting on Denver, which I was so surprised how much bigger it was this year, right? Like given the market dynamics, I figured it would be much smaller, and it was actually significantly bigger, and it moved to this bigger venue, and it's always so loud, right? Like everyone's talking over each other, all the stages are competing. You go out and it's kind of this like frenzy of merch, basically, like whoever has the coolest merch is like who's getting the people at their tables. And to your point, it's like almost impossible to dog food or like visualize or show or have people like really interacting with the technology. It becomes like more of, a people thing. And this happens on like all conferences. This isn't just crypto, but I'm just curious, like what advice you have for event planners, like, especially given your role in ETH Denver, or things that you're seeing that are like really working well. If it's like more intimate things, if it's like collaborative content creation, like what's actually working to have to see the signal through the noise and actually be like seen in spaces that are getting bigger and louder and more difficult to navigate.
Yeah, I think when it comes to breaking through the noise, it's about innovating in a way that feels very organic to your community. So if you're going to do something like launch an NFT, well, what utility is that going to have for that community? And how can you activate that in an IRL way, whether it's that they get special access to something, whatever that might look like. But I think ultimately, like the brands who are doing that well and who are standing out, it's because they're not following a formula. They're not necessarily using one particular type of tech. They're really leaning into what their community is interested in and how their community wants to play with things. And a lot of that just really comes down to having that back and forth relationship with your community and really utilizing them to help you seed adoption of whatever it is that you're trying to get off the ground. Really integrating them into your, whether it's a booth or whether it's like a small gathering or content or programming, figuring out how the people who are most passionate about what you're doing can be a part of that experience is where I see brands most successful.
Is there a person or a company that's really inspiring you and how they're doing that? I know, like for me, and it's not unique, but like Mischief, I think it's just done such a chaotic and amazing job of like creating these like viral products. And that's not going to work for every brand. That might be a little bit more, conservative and how they want to represent it. Like Mischief has just like really stood out from the crowd and built this sort of viral cultural brand around themselves. I'm curious if there's other companies that you're really inspired by who are actually activating their communities well and representing themselves well out in the market.
Yeah. Well, I think you have had several of them. I think Co-Create, Dispatch, Metis, Franklin, those are all like have strong female leaders in leadership roles and are doing some really incredible work as far as like how they are choosing to activate IRL. in just a couple of weeks, Dispatch is hosting this really awesome studio at NFT NYC where they're going to be integrating this full end-to-end shopping experience with a bunch of luxury brands like Lacoste and things like that, which will be so amazing. I mean, they're taking the dog fooding to like the next level and making it kind of like that whole week. They're also pulling in these amazing partners and collaborators. And so I think, they've done a really good job listening to what their communities ask for, working with partners and integrating all of that. So I think that's going to be really exciting. In terms of just other brands that I see doing cool things with community, certainly POAP, I've seen them do just like so many different things and really listen to features that people are asking for. And especially activating around IRL events, or they just launched this piece of tech called Salsa, where you can have wallet communication with people who have your POAPs following events. And then in terms of just other like amazing branded groups, I think Boys Club does an incredible job with their merch, their branding, the way that they involve women, and the way that they gather with community. And another that I just think is so interesting and is probably like just on the path to really like make some noise is Disco, disco.xyz. I'm not sure if they've been on, but their CEO is female, so a women-led company. They're helping bring decentralized identity and verifiable credentials on chain, and just feel like they also do a really great job of pulling in that community and making an incredible impact at their in-person experiences.
I love it. Yeah, Evan was actually in the Myosin house that we were
great
at it for ETH Denver. And so Evan is the CEO of Disco. So she's going to be on the list. I love this question because this is usually the question where I find the next people that we want to share their stories because they're incredible. And you're totally right. We have actually covered a lot of those people. It's funny, it becomes a small industry really quickly, and it's really collaborative. So I love that. What are you most excited about? I mean, you're spending a lot of time in the ecosystem in different events. Like, where are you investing your time, money, energy in the space, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. I think where I'm most investing time this year is really trying to bring together a variety of different people who where I can really add like value to bringing those teams together. I'm exposed to so many teams and projects and founders and investors. And for me, like what I love to do is just figure out ways to like bring all of those different people into one room and let them have like an amazing experience on top of like incredible conversation where they leave feeling like, wow, that was like not just a loud box with a DJ for 4 hours, which crypto and Web3 can be so prone to do. But that actually left me with a lot of really valuable relationships and people that I can move forward to follow up with, whether it's for funding or mentorship or whatever that looks like. That's definitely my big focus this year, pulling smaller groups of really incredible people together to have those conversations.
I definitely think that's one of your superpowers. You're just incredible at
Thanks.
connecting the dots, and especially across like funding, resourcing, people, time, energy. How do those things flow? I'm curious, with sort of some of the changes in the macro environment, a lot of like sort of like the bigger sponsors and funders. I know you play a really important role in the community of like bringing some of those capital together, especially for ETH Denver. What have you noticed in the process of like raising funds for these events and the things that we want to see out in the world? And what advice would you give to somebody maybe getting started or like thinking about how they're going to navigate and plan this year of the funding, the sponsors and the partners that they either approach or look to collaborate with?
Yeah, certainly. So I think when it comes to event sponsorship, trends that we're generally seeing this year are around the developer and builder focused events. This is a bear market, it is always the time that we see a lot of building and a lot of incredible tech come out of a bear market. And so for that reason, I think events who are really catering to that crowd are doing really well in terms of sponsorship dollars and what they're able to raise. I think where we're seeing things really fall off are probably some of the more some of the events that were more focused on just NFTs. I think those are having a harder time right now because that kind of had its own bull run last year. Some of the more niche events where they might not be like heavy developer, I feel like are definitely having a harder time. When it comes to you as a founder or as someone working in a company and how you want to strategically place funds across the event ecosystem and deciding where you want to show up, I think it's always important to be very goal driven in making those decisions. I think some people will say, oh, amazing, like I'm going to throw 20K at this event and we're going to leave with all of these leads and it's going to be great. And there's so much more to creating an experience that's actually going to leave you with what you're desiring to get out of it. There's also a way to do it with less budget. So, you know, in a bear market, we do see teams who want to spend less on their event activations. That's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it can be a really great thing because you may be bringing together smaller groups of more passionate people on your project who really may help with the growth trajectory, with funding, may connect you to a good investor. So I think certainly those are some of the trends and the strategies that I've seen implemented and that we're helping teams at Serotonin implement this year, all of which I think are, you know, really impactful and certainly tend to change with the markets, but have overall, I think, been a really great kickoff to the start of this year.
Such good advice. I know even you mentioned, especially with Youth Denver, we were seeing this trend of less satellite events getting sponsored, and it really like a lot of the capital now flowing to like a few core major events, which I think was a really great trend that you identified, and that what you just shared of you know, thinking about builder ecosystem hackathons, things like that. And even as a non-technical person, you can both like host and attend you know, hackathons and build sessions. So I think that's so important to highlight for anyone who's listening. A lot of the people we've interviewed here have actually like built their teams, even as non-technical folks, like from attending hackathons. So I love that so much. It's really good advice. How can we keep in touch with you personally as you navigate this space and activate events and all the great things you're doing, and then Serotonin as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on all platforms by my name, Hannah Oreskovich, and my @ is @blonde on the run, and that's BLOND on the run. And Serotonin, serotonin.co, and then on Twitter @serotonin_HQ.
Amazing. Well, we'll definitely be following along. I always love the things that you're hosting. And I'm sure we'll see each other at a number of the different events that are happening this year. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing, what you've shared, and for being such a great advocate and supporter and friend. Honestly, I so appreciate you.
Hey, right back at you. Thanks so much for having me and hosting me. It's nice to be hosted.
Absolutely. All right. Talk to you soon.
Sounds great.